Hi, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the first webinar and our series of webinar on urban logistics. My name is Mehdi, and I'm a board director at the CILT Singapore and also a senior lecturer of logistics and supply chain management at Singapore University of Social Sciences. Thank you for attending this webinar. We have over 120 participants from all over the world, from Asia, Africa, Europe, the Middle East, and North America. So far in this series of webinars on urban logistics, we have covered mall and retail, freight related to the cross-border, specifically for ports and airports, and also safety and sustainability. So you may access the recording and also the Q&A documents and other insights from the CILT website. Today, we will be focusing on urban distribution and last mile deliveries. So significant growth in e-commerce has impacted almost all dimensions of the urban freight, including the number of delivery and pickup trips, service providers, even type of vehicles which are being used, delivery locations, the timing, and many other aspects. So we are privileged to have three highly experienced practitioners in urban logistics domain for today's webinar. I would like to thank them again for accepting our invitation to share their experience and insight despite their busy schedule. We have Mr. Sung Thi New, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Peak Network in Singapore. We have Mr. Paul Lu, the Chief Operating Officer of Lalamove, and we have Mr. Patrick Wong, Country Manager of GoGoX Singapore. I will provide a more detailed background for each speaker later on during the webinar. This is the agenda for today's webinar. First, I will provide a quick background on urban distribution and last mile deliveries. Then our panel members will share their insights for about 30 minutes. And lastly, we will have the Q&A, mainly from the questions that have been raised when you registered for the webinar. And also we will try to address some of the questions from the chat box today. So urban logistics is a very complex field, and it has a variety of market sectors and also a variety of stakeholders involved. So the heterogeneity of activities and also the products which are being moved in cities make it very challenging to find solutions and that fit all the stakeholders and also all the market sectors involved. In general, we can identify the six market sectors in urban distribution and logistics. We have retail, hotel, restaurant, and catering, couriers and postal services. We also have construction and road services, waste and waste collection services. And lastly, more recently, healthcare also has been added to the market sectors in the urban freight. In terms of stakeholders, broadly, we can categorize them into shippers, carriers, city authorities or administrators, and residents. So each of these stakeholders, they have unique characteristics, strategies, even business models, and objectives or roles within the urban logistics. Here we can observe some of the driving forces which are impacting urban logistics and distribution. So we have population growth and urbanization. We have extensive growth in e-commerce and also the desire for speed, both from the the sellers and also from the consumers. These have increased the complexities of managing urban logistics. Besides the increased attention to sustainability, as we discussed in the previous webinar, it is going to impact how decisions are made within the urban logistics systems, because now we need to consider not only reducing cost, but also addressing the environmental concerns. So it will be a multi-objective decision-making process. And lastly, we have the new and emerging technologies. So our hope is that these technologies, they help to reduce some of the externalities and also some of the challenges that we have in city logistics. In terms of logistics operations in urban areas, we can think of three main operational challenges. So the first one is livability and street. So oftentimes what happens is that the freight vehicles are not considered as the priority users of the streets. And the street designs are becoming narrower and narrower. So it makes the freight service providers to use smaller and smaller vehicles to be able to move around these type of streets. And besides, these freight vehicles often have difficulty accessing to the curb. So what happens, either they do double parking, which increases the congestion and the safety concerns, or they have to continue driving in a hope to find a parking spot to get access to the curb. And besides that, the movement of goods, they extend beyond the curb. So buildings are always the origin and the destination of freight trips. But what happens is that often the buildings, they do not have enough capacity in terms of size and number of loading the docks, freight elevators, even on-site storage to serve the delivery demands placed on them today. Lastly, we have the environment. We talked about environmental externalities and solutions in the previous webinar. So because of the activities, we have different type of externalities. In addition to that, the modern cities, they are embracing a more diverse mix of land uses. Now we have commingling of manufacturing, commercial, freight, and residential districts. So this makes the residential districts to be more sensitive to the freight activities in urban areas. So in terms of solutions for the operational challenges, we can consider these four broad solutions. We have urban consolidation centers. So they help us to facilitate more efficient outbound transport. But the problem is that they need very high initial investment. And besides, the operational costs are kind of always higher than their overall income, which it highlights the important role of public authorities support if we want to successfully develop and operate the UCCs. So one alternative to the UCCs can be collaborative transportation and pooling, so which are a specific form of resource sharing. So shared cross-docking facilities by different logistics providers. It can be logistics networks and even open e-marketplace platforms. Also, as discussed in our first webinar, one of the main challenges in the mall deliveries is that the drivers, when they get access to the loading bay, they need to offload and carry the goods all the way to the stores. So it increases the turnaround time for the drivers. It increases the congestion in the loading bays. It reduces the efficiency of the drivers and vehicles. So one solution is using in-mall distribution systems. So we have an in-mall logistics service provider who receives and also then dispatch the goods to the shops, receives from the drivers and dispatch to the shops and provides the last 100 meters of the delivery to the retailers. So we had some test trials in Singapore a few years ago and regarding the in-mall distribution systems. And lastly, we have the futuristic idea of connecting major freight infrastructures and malls and also major residential areas via underground delivery network to help us to increase the efficiency and reduce externalities. In addition to these distribution systems, urban authorities, they can also adopt various improvement measures or initiatives. So under the regulatory measures, for example, like access restrictions, uh, these kind of measures are a package of rules or provisions, often supported by enforcement system, and they are mainly designed to control the activity of freight in urban areas. Using market-based measures, authorities can use price mechanism, hoping to change the behavior of the both service providers and also the customers in terms of freight in urban areas. Land use planning and infrastructure measures are often the most expensive ones, so the responsibility is lying on the urban authorities and public authorities because they're expensive, it takes time for implementation, and also high cost of maintenance. And lastly, as I highlighted earlier, the success of every urban logistics measure or system depends on the interaction between the heterogeneous stakeholders that we have. So stakeholders engagement has been recognized as one of the important part of any decision-making process. Now I move on to e-commerce and last mile deliveries. So the increasing of the internet penetration, the smartphones and digital business models and payments, they have all resulted in substantial growth in e-commerce over the last decade. What we can observe is that the significant increase in home deliveries compared to the deliveries to the stores, and these deliveries typically involve smaller shipments. And often the local authorities, they see the e-commerce, and last mile delivery as a business problem, which, resolves itself because there is an economic interest in doing so. Another important point to note is that the e-commerce doesn't necessarily imply the absence of physical stores, but rather it's kind of an evolution towards omni-channel retailing. So we can see the results of the one recent survey by McKinsey in the US market, and 3 out of 4 US consumers are shopping both online and in stores, and many are also participating in the omni-channel activities. I believe this trend and the data, it's quite similar to what we can see in Singapore and some other countries. So, but this increase in the last mile deliveries, they become with several challenges. So the last mile deliveries are often the major effectors of heavy traffic in the urban areas. And one of the main essential features is the high degree of fragmentation and low range of use of cargo load compartment of the vehicles. Apart from that, the home deliveries, they also pose an enormous logistical challenge because of the unpredictability of the demand, which is coupled with the strict delivery time window and mainly for low profit margin products. And besides that, the substantial increase in returns because the consumers, they expect smooth and free processing of the returns for their online purchases. And also we have seen substantial surge in on-demand instant deliveries, those which are done, within 15 minutes to 2 hours deliveries, and the increase in the number of dark stores and dark kitchens in the urban areas. And lastly, we have the not at home problem, which leads to high rates of delivery failures, which impacts the efficiency, cost, security, and so on. In terms of solutions, so service providers and sometimes authorities, they have come up with various innovative technologies and business models to address these challenges. So we can see secure delivery systems. Either the delivery person get access to your home, or they get access to the trunk of your vehicle. So kind of addressing the late deliveries. Also, using delivery robots in terms of AGV, droids, even drones, they can both address some of the challenges that we mentioned, and also the manpower problem. And we also have cycle logistics that we discussed in the previous webinars, trying to cope with the congestion, lack of parking spaces, and reduce the environmental externalities. And lastly, we have parcel lockers as an alternate to the doorstep deliveries. Soon, T will be providing a detailed analysis on parcel lockers later on in the webinar. So now I want to invite our panel speakers to share their insights. We will start with Mr. Patrick Wong. Patrick is the country manager for GoGoX Singapore, and under his leadership, GoGoX Singapore operations have experienced tremendous growth over the past 6 years, and they have established a strong relationship with multiple anchor clients. GoGoX Singapore also has received multiple industry awards, such as the Asia E-commerce Award in 2020. Patrick, over to you.
Thank you for having me again this morning. It's good to see a great audience, and more importantly, I'm honored to sit with the fellow panelists on this session today. Let me share my slides. Go. Okay, so what I'm going to share, it's a bit of a context from Singapore's context, and then at the same time, I think a lot of the information is quite similar across all the sharings, and especially Dr. Syed, you mentioned earlier some of the nuances in urban logistics. So I'm not going to go in depth, but more importantly, I think we want to leave some time for Q&A at the later part. Okay, so just to set a bit of context, who is GoGoX? We are in 6 countries. We are in 360 cities. We serve clients. We serve on demand as well as contract logistics in terms of scheduled deliveries. Primarily, we're trying to solve a problem where we match supply with demand. So we have access to a fleet of drivers. Across the 6 countries, we have approximately 5 million registered drivers, but in Singapore, we have about 3,000 drivers across all vehicle types, from motorcycles all the way to trucks. I think more importantly, from the logistics perspective, we are trying to support businesses where they do not want to invest in fleet in terms of manpower costs or in terms of the infrastructure of vehicles, for example. So providing the full suite of delivery services, these are some of the clients that we support in the region, from last mile as well as middle mile deliveries. So coming to the topic for today, I think last mile challenges, there are a lot, and it's not new. It's been around for decades, and the question is, as with how the whole delivery scene has evolved through the years, the question is how then, as service providers, how do we come in to sort of meet those needs, to answer those problems, and then more importantly, find solutions from a collaborative perspective. For the benefit of our overseas guests, this is the map of Singapore. It's approximately 50 kilometers east to west. I think you can cover under an hour. If I'm not mistaken, there's no traffic. And in Singapore, I think the common challenges, and this is, I'm very sure it's similar across all countries. I think we have seen volume growth, the acceleration of online e-commerce post-COVID. Common to all countries, we have manpower issues, shortages of manpower. Nobody wants to do logistics because it's deemed to be a very manual, heavy lifting job. And now, obviously, to manage these things, we have high operating costs across. So if you take a leaf from, say, Prime deliveries in the US, and this is 2022 data, Prime versus the other online retailers, Prime is able to solve a problem or is trying to help ensure deliveries reach the doorstep. So from the data, it shows that Amazon is able, from click to the door within 1.9 days. Now, I think this is solved. In many different formats in terms of how they manage across all the cities, how they create sub warehouses, how they manage demand forecasting, as well as SKUs within the different cities. So I think they are able to do that. And we see research, or even in the news, other players like Walmart and Targets of the world are trying to also emulate this by providing access or logistics support from within the hundreds of stores across the US. So if you look at it, the evolution of e-commerce, it's I want it now. Everything, it's pretty much done online, right? In Singapore, we have food deliveries, right? The Grab Food, the Food Pandas of the world. And then obviously on the other extreme, you have your grocery deliveries, right? Everything now is delivered to the doorstep. So everybody wants it now, everybody wants it fast. And if you see, one of the key things was telemedicine. It has seen a tremendous growth during COVID as well as post-COVID, that it is now becoming a norm, right? That expectations of things having delivered to the doorstep. And if you see from the whole delivery perspective, things are starting to evolve. No longer is it good to wait 3 to 5 days. There are things like now same-day deliveries. And we're not talking about food now. We're talking about things like large home appliances. Because if you want to change your refrigerator or your washing machine, you cannot wait for days because your items will be there. So stores today, or brands, are actually offering same-day deliveries for large home appliances, right? As seen in Singapore. If you look at Decathlon here in Singapore, same thing, 2-hour express click and collect. I could place an order and then have it picked up from the nearest store near my home in under 2 hours, right? So the question is, everybody wants it fast, everybody wants it delivered, but the question is, how then can we do it better? So just sharing some very high level best practices, right, to solve these problems. I think first of all, from a GoGoX perspective, we have access to a network of drivers, right? So we are not fixed like a traditional 3PL where we have, let's say 10 vehicles or 100 vehicles, and that's the capacity that we can handle. So because it's GoGoX, we can have access to a fleet of drivers or a network of drivers. We are able then to support the different brands, the different delivery opportunities out there, right? We talk about things like automation and optimization. I'm sure my fellow panelists will be discussing further on. But at the end of the day, as much as we want to offer fast and efficient deliveries, the idea is, how can we optimize the orders? How can we further consolidate the orders so much so that when that van leaves the warehouse, it can cover a street efficiently, right? Let's not make the driver go around the entire island just to deliver your e-commerce parcel. How then can it be consolidated? I think there are solutions out there. I believe e-commerce companies or online platforms are trying to provide, whereby when you place an order, depending on your time slot you have chosen, or the day you have chosen, or where you are staying, there is intelligence AI within the systems to then try to optimize or consolidate your orders. And then there is a lot of softwares out there, technologies out there that can help with this consolidation and optimization. And I think in Singapore's context, manpower, it's really beginning to be a very big problem, shortage of manpower. And that's why there are local networks in Singapore. And I've been honored to work with Sun T, our next panelist, where he was instrumental in building Singapore's parcel locker network. So I'll leave Sunti to speak more about that, where I think that provides an option for more consolidation and optimization of the capacity that we have today, the delivery capacity that we have today. In terms, and I'm just going to end it right here. I think in terms of the economics, right? Brands as well as customers, good and cheap definitely won't be fast. Fast and good won't be cheap. But more importantly, if it's cheap and fast, it definitely won't be good. I think we serve a broad base of customers, brands, and as well as end consumers. I think everyone needs to understand the nuances of last mile deliveries, right? And we are very blessed to have clients, blue chip clients that work with us to understand this, and then we come together to the table to co-create solutions to ensure that the last mile delivery experience, which is very important, in some cases is the last 100 meters, right? That experience has to be a good one, because at the end of the day, it is our drivers that is the face to your brand, right? So that's where I think collaboration is key to working together to provide that solution. Because at the end of the day, these problems that we face in Singapore, it's a problem faced by almost everyone. So I'll leave that, my slides. The audience here may take a picture if they need to reach out to me separately or use our services. That's a promo code. I think, thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. It was an informative presentation, especially highlighting the problems and the best practices. Next, I would like to ask Mr. Sunti New to share his insights with us. Sunti founded Peak Network to connect the e-commerce marketplaces, merchants, and logistics service providers. And also when he was the cluster director for trade and connectivity in IMDA, he drove various digitalization and transformation initiatives, including the Locker Alliance pilot, in-mall distribution that I just mentioned, and also the autonomous delivery trials. Sunti, over to you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for inviting me to this event. Grateful to be able to share some of this initiative. The conversation that we have today on urban logistics is very close to my heart because of the various work that I've done in both IMD as well as PIC. So in today's session, there is a very experienced panelist that will cover the topics. Therefore, I'll focus a lot more on the nationwide parcel locker network, what it does and how it helps to bring the benefits to the e-commerce delivery sector. Singapore has chosen to implement a nationwide parcel locker network to address precisely the manpower as well as the productivity issues in the last mile delivery sector. We do so by providing convenience to consumers as well as to businesses. And hopefully by doing so through a lot of aggregation of multiple parcels dropping at the same collection point or receptacle, we are able to increase the efficiency of urban logistics. Yeah. This slide talks very much about we estimate there's about 250,000 parcels delivered a day in Singapore. COVID actually increases the number of parcels, and then post-COVID it came down a little bit because people go out and buy things online from physical store. But I think this is now we estimate it's about 250,000 parcels a day. It is still growing, and I think it'll continue to grow. However, as many of you are already aware and heard, there's a lot of challenges associated to last mile delivery. And these 5 of them that I've listed here are no surprise to many of us. So I'll not elaborate on that, but we can move on to talk about what PIC is doing to transform the last mile sector. We have implemented about 1,000, to be exact, it's 1,008 parcel locker now in the public designated area. That is in HDB. HDB is the public housing area for Singapore. More than 80% of our residents stays in this residential area. And we also have it implemented in transit nodes like the MRT stations, subway station, as well as bus interchange and community centers where a lot of residents gathered and enjoy social gathering together. The network is an open network that is accessible to all players. It complements other locker in other areas like the private condos as well as the shopping malls and so forth. Most of the lockers are 24/7. Some of them, if it's in a gated facility, it may be restricted to the operating hours of these gated facilities. And after the implementation, the average distance between a HDB flat or a block of residential dwellers to a public locker like Pig Locker is within 113 meter point to point. That's approximately 2 to 3 minutes walking distance. The entire network is owned and operated by Pig. It's a single operator that operate the public infrastructure. It covers all parts of Singapore. It works with other local operators to create a local alliance network that make it available for marketplaces and logistic player to use. Yeah. This is just a brief snapshot of where we are. All over Singapore, they are spread all around Singapore in every corner. As long as there's a public housing, you'll see them. This is how it looks like. We have various sizes. You'll see that a lot of e-commerce parcel, they fit into the extra small and small locker compartments. While the some other use cases, more B2B, they would require larger parcel. So the extra small can fit into children's size shoebox, and the small one can fit into 2 ladies size shoebox. For the largest one that we have can fit into a mini luggage. So it is intentionally configured to allow different business use cases to use these lockers. The majority of the e-commerce parcels actually fit into the extra small and small compartment size. How does it work? Consumer buy things online. During checkout, they choose a self-collect options to pick up from a Pig Locker. The logistic company get a order from the marketplace to deliver to the locker. When it get delivered to this locker, the consumer receive a notification with a PIN. Consumer goes to the locker, key in the PIN, and get access to the parcels they buy at his own convenience. So he can visit the locker anytime, 24/7. He can choose where he wants the parcel to be dropped off all over the island. So that's how we bring convenience to consumer and businesses. And by doing multiple parcel drop at a single location, we help businesses consolidate parcels to drop off a single point. And that's how we increase productivity. So what's the benefits to the marketplace? It's a lot faster because once the delivery is completed, you get notified. People can pick it up anytime. There's no need to coordinate and miss each other. Consumer is assured that there's no waiting time. I don't have to stay at home and wait for my parcel if I'm looking forward to the purchases that I had. Very convenient, 24/7. As I talk about, you can choose to where to pick up anywhere. There is a lower delivery cost because of the ability to consolidate. So typically the marketplace charge cheaper for delivery to lockers than to doorstep, as an example. With better consumer retention and increased sales because consumer are more satisfied with picking up the parcel and there's no misses. From a consumer perspective, obviously there is no delays. There's unnecessary waiting time. There's better privacy because sometimes the purchases that you make, you want to surprise your partner during Valentine's Day and you buy something and ask her to pick it up from a locker, things like that. It's more sustainable and green because of the productivity increase. Some time ago, when we did captures of a video of a particular courier, and this is a real life case, we saw him dropping off 26 parcel in slightly more than 5 minutes. To be exact, I think he dropped off 25 when the counter stopped at 5 minutes. So that's how fast delivery guy can drop off and how many parcels can drop off at one go, compared to visiting a doorstep and dropping off a parcel that takes also about 5 minutes because you need to take the lift up. You need to go to the door, knock on the door, and wait for someone to pick up the parcel from you. All those things add together is about 5 minutes as well. So you can imagine that it's about 25 times productivity saving here. 2,500. No, sorry. Yeah, 2,500% increase in productivity. Of course, this is an extreme case. If you have the volume to consolidate, it is very easy to hit 5 to 8 times productivity saving. Yeah. From my LSP perspective, I talk about that productivity. It addressed the manpower shortages because there's not enough drivers in Singapore. It reduces rework because once you drop it off, the consumer will come and pick it up. So you almost do not need to do a second trip to reattempt. Obviously, it's a future mode of delivery. You're more connected, you're more ready to implement a solution like that, and consumers welcome that. So all in all, I think that's where how the local network benefits the logistic guys. And that's all I have, very briefly. So happy to take any question if you have later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Somtip, for sharing a comprehensive review of the state of parcel lockers in Singapore, and especially highlighting their benefits to various stakeholders involved. Lastly, I would like to invite Mr. Paul Du, who is the Chief Operating Officer of Lalamo. Paul is responsible for the global operations, strategic planning, and business development of the company. He has more than 28 years of global management experience, focusing mainly on delivering business services, solutions, and outstanding client services. Paul, over to you.
Right. Good morning. Thanks for having me today. Let me pull up the screen. All right. Same as Patrick, Lalamove is also an online logistic platform. We came from Hong Kong, and I'm glad that Patrick already talked about the basic operating model and some of the key issues. So before I share with all of you some of my observations and our stories, just want to put things into perspective and talk about the opportunity in front of a typical logistic platform like ourselves. This is the global figures over the last few years with some projection forward. And I'm focusing on ground transport because everything going to the air or in the sea, they are a subset of all this. Everything eventually have to go back to the land. And there are three categories: intra-city, intercity, and the obvious opportunity is the fastest growth express on demand. And that's for sure cover all the last mile within the urban we talk about, as well as the first mile, and to a certain extent covering most of the mid miles too. And when it's come to the region, we can see who have been the major market in the past, and what's the growth rate, and where are the opportunities moving forward. So definitely Southeast Asia, ASEAN is a very important market. China, another major market. LATAM also is a market that is growing very fast, up and coming. And the last slide is a bit on Singapore. I think the others already talked about the e-commerce driven growth. But a typical platform like ourselves, other than e-commerce, there are many other things that we transport. A lot of the goods are still coming from retail and wholesale, as well as health material, equipment as a result of COVID, food stuff, whether it's cooked food or food material, also another important part of the business. So we actually started about 10 years ago, coming to our 10th years in Hong Kong. Then we expand quickly to cover many major markets that I just talked about with fast growing opportunities. We are super huge in mainland China, covering more than close to 400 cities. And then we have our presence in all the major cities in ASEAN. Last year, we started in Dhaka, Bangladesh. And in addition to Asia, we are having 17 cities in Brazil. We also have our operation in Mexico cities. So many of the things that I'm going to talk about cover the learnings we have in all the markets that we serve. Many of them are quite similar to Singapore. There are some local differences as well. The basic component of the tech platform, we cover definitely the shipper or the receiver, as well as the drivers. Many of them are under the people side. The goods definitely is important. You want to make sure that the vehicle that you order can fit the goods in it. But at the same time, road essentially is map, is an important part of our model. And together with vehicle, all these four major components, they are linked up and optimized through technologies. Now, unlike many of the high-tech business, we are not at the cutting edge of technologies, but we have to doing extremely well in making use of existing technologies, like digitization of the map, improvement of payment system, anti-fraud strategies, basic apps, UX, UI, just name a few. The basic foundation or the building blocks of the tech platform is our technologies. So a big part of our investment going into our tech as well as our tech team. But in addition to that, in order for the market to operate well, the infrastructure must be there, whether it's the internet penetration, 5G, road, many of the physical stuff that we talked about early this morning, as well as policies. Policies set by the government, because manpower was mentioned a number of times. This is an important part of our business, and it is also an important part of how sustainable our urban logistics moving forward. So I think over the last few years, COVID definitely have turned the world upside down, and we are glad that we are out of it and we are in the recovery mode. But when it comes to the importance of smart logistics, I think this slide shows that many of our users, it is helping them greatly. And majority, by the way, our users, they are small and medium enterprise. There are major enterprise, there are individuals, but a big bulk of it, they are all SME. So there are typical story like this. A small F&B company, they may be having a good time or hard time during COVID, depends on what kind of business you are in, because people were not going out, but many people were ordering takeout. So that was the COVID time period. But after that, recovery, a lot depends on how fast you can grow. And in order to grow in a short period of time, while cost efficiently, making use of platform, being able to scale up quickly without investing in your fleet helps SME like this to recover after COVID. And then we have similar story in all the market that we serve. And just remember that during COVID, although many of the business, they were slowing down, but urban logistics play an extremely important, I would say critical role in delivering many of the healthcare supply. And even after that, remote medicine become a big part of our business. So definitely urban logistics have an important role. So in addition to the business side, I think we have our tech when it comes to ESG, and it is not just for your annual report, not just for the investor, I mean, but it is essential to power the business moving forward. In fact, power the sectors going forward, because whether it is about emissions, we can have a very major role in promoting EV, or when it comes to those people involved, welfare of drivers, partners, or how sustainable SME could be with or without the support of our online platform, to the role I just talked about, how platform can play for the urban logistics, linking up all the essential components together. So yes, things cannot be fast, good, and cheap at the same time, but we do have our promise that we want to make sure that fulfillment is there, we can respond fast, and we provide fantastic services. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul, for your presentation, especially on highlighting the growth projections and also the benefits of adopting digitization and smart logistics for SMEs and consumers. Now we will be moving on to the Q&A section. For the participants, you may use the chat box to raise your questions if you haven't posted them when you sign up for the seminars. So I will try to go through mix of questions from the registered one and also the new ones from the chat box. So let's start with Patrick. So what are the typical failed delivery rates for urban logistics, urban last mile deliveries, and whether it has increased post-COVID or it has decreased? Can you comment on that, please?
Hi, thanks for this question. I think, first of all, we serve different clients, right? And the fact is, the question alludes to is, what kind of items are we talking that can or cannot have failed deliveries, right? So if you're talking about food, then obviously you cannot have any risk of failed deliveries. And as such, the delivery slot, pattern, time, all has to meet that specific need, versus if you say you bought a handphone cover through the marketplace. So there is no expectation in terms of how the items are delivered to a certain extent. So, but in typical, across our clients, we're looking at about a 98% success delivery, again, depending on the type of product. But you need to understand also that I think post-COVID, a lot of people have actually gone back to work, right? So there is an increase in terms of deliveries or people not at home when deliveries are attempted. As such, along the way, because of this trend and behavior, we are working with the clients to see how then we can have what we call the successful proof of delivery, or what we call also the authorized release, right? In terms of, for example, if it's a non-critical or not very expensive item, can we leave it behind the door? Can we leave it behind the plant? Can we leave it with the neighbor? Versus how strict is that item, and then do we even bring it back? But I think some of our clients are also looking at the option like what the PIC network is offering. I think that sort of eliminates this industry problem in terms of the customer not being at home, or allowing the customer to have the flexibility to pick up the item as and when. So I think again, it depends on the item and the brand for failed delivery rates.
Okay. Oh, thank you, Patrick. So for next question, maybe I would like to ask Paul to provide an answer. So, what are your recommendations to address manpower issues? You know, shortage of manpower, the issues with the wages, their safety in the in urban logistics domain.
Yeah. Well, the people, the manpower that we are connected are major in users and the delivery side, driver partners. And platform has the advantage of integrating fragmented supply and demand together. So the simplest way to describe it is to make use of the least resources to do the most. But in order to do so, the business model must be flexible enough. The way we are operating is what people call the gig economy. And if you break that, then you go back to the traditional way to do it. The cost is a lot higher than the cost, logistic cost enjoyed by the SME will go sky high. So a lot of them are focus on the driver partner side. And also the new generation, younger people, the way they work, they choose to spend their time also different from, well, our generations. And we provide flexible working hours for the partners. They are their own boss. They can choose to do more than one job, even work across more than one platform. There are a lot of freedom for them. So any attempt to break that, on the surface, you may be trying to protect the individuals, but behind the scene, you are destroying a very efficient ecosystem. So my advice to whoever doing the administration, do think about the consequence, not just the platform, not just the driver partners, but the second degree or third degree impact on all the SME who have very critical need when it comes to their logistic cost.
Okay. Thank you, Paul. For the third question, I would like to focus on the parcel lockers. So probably, Sunti, I appreciate if you could answer that. So what can be done to increase the adoption rates, both by the customers and also the logistics service providers, especially those service providers that they don't have the scale in one area, so they may prefer just go directly deliver to the doorstep rather than going to the lockers. Please.
Thank you. Maybe I'll provide the answer in two aspects. One in a more generic flavor, and then after that I can go a little bit specific to an operator that is do not have a big scale. Firstly, for the parcel locker to work, a lot of time the consumer are the one that's making the decision to choose whether the delivery should go to a locker or parcel receptacles like a collection point. Therefore, the exposure of the availability of these receptacles to the consumer is important. And working with a major marketplace like Shopee become a very important step to expose the entire network to the consumer to choose. Again, that also requires the logistic player to play a part in collaborating with the marketplaces, whether it's a partner of the marketplaces or their in-house fleet. The ability to drop off the parcel at the lockers requires a lot of integration and so forth at the back end to make that happen. So in all, I think that whole collaboration together is key to make sure that the adoptions go up. Recently, we launched a joint promotion with Shopee to provide free deliveries to locker. We saw a tremendous increase in adoption and utilization. So case in point, I think one of the earlier point in your slides talks about pricing interventions commercially and so forth. Certainly, there's another key area of driving adoption, changing that behavior, because people begin to experience, and once they like the experience, we hope that they'll stick to it. Yeah, so that's another key area. If I were to drive a little bit more specific into your second part of the question that talks about a smaller operator, how would they do that? Because the lack of scale make it a bit harder for them to do it. Without the consolidation, and yet you still have to pay for a fee to deliver to the locker, to use the locker, then obviously commercially doesn't justify to so. A lot of operators end up letting the consumer make the choice. They may add an additional charge to that, and if consumer really prefers dropping off to the locker, they will do that. We have programs that we work with smaller players to allow them to scale based on where their focus is geographically, as an example. They need not take up the entire network. We also have technology partner as well as our own internal portals that we connect with some of these logistic players, as seller, to allow them to connect with us at ease. So these are all the various things that we do to help smaller players onboard the local network. And I must say there are some good success in doing so because, for example, we had a program with Q Express to do Q delivery. So small businesses or even consumers who want to ship to another consumers, they buy these delivery services of Q10 marketplace, and then they just deliver on a per use basis. Those are done fairly easily and simply. There's not a lot of integration. So these are many different things that we do to help to drive the adoption. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you. So I'm going to ask maybe about the issue of the car light and car free streets or plans, which often comes up with the urban planners or even some mobility planners. And we had some trials in Singapore, and perhaps in future we will be seeing more and more in the new development areas and so on. So I want to know what are your feedbacks about this car light or car free plans and how it's going to impact your operations in future? Any of the panel members wants to comment?
Maybe let me chime in on this.
Sure.
For GoGuards in Singapore, we have been working with some of the government agencies as well as the up and coming delivery association, or sort of a union in Singapore. And I think from my understanding today, with a lot of support from the government or the different agencies, they are actually talking to, for example, condominium owners, management committees, town councils, the councils that manage the housing estates, to afford more concession or more options for the delivery people. For example, extending the grace period for delivery parking charges, for example, or then allowing within condominiums or even urban roads or in the cities, specific or more loading areas for drivers to park and then do the deliveries. I think, again, it's a collaborative effort from within a tripartite within the delivery association, the companies like ourselves, as well as the government agencies, to come together to help solve that problem. Because at the end of the day, I think we can't run away from it.
Okay, yeah, thank you. It's again, highlighting the importance of the stakeholder engagements from different parties, from authorities, providers, even resident sites and sellers. Thank you, Patrick. And one question who is raised in the chat box and also was asked before by the participants is maybe I ask you, Paul, to comment on this. So you operate in Singapore, you mentioned you operate in other Asian cities in South America, North America. So does your business strategy and plan, they change according to the type of cities you operate? Because you mentioned you operate in around 400 cities. So how many business plans or strategies you are adopting?
Well, everywhere we go, we follow the same business model and using the same tech platform, but we do local adaptation. There are some areas that definitely you need to adapt locally. Map is a very obvious one, and then also payment. These are the typical area that you need to adapt locally. But everywhere we go, we use the same business model and tech platform, because scale is important in our business. If you don't have scale, you have no chance.
Okay. Especially, I remember I was one time I gave one assignment to students how, for example, NinjaVan operates differently in Singapore and Indonesia with thousands of islands. But perhaps maybe, as you mentioned, they focus on the areas which they have the scale, so they don't need to adjust that much. And maybe the last question before we conclude the seminar. So from the young graduates, they're asking what kind of skills you're looking to see in the graduates, especially those who are studying logistics, supply chain related courses. So what kind of skills you're looking to see to be able maybe to join to more planning, digitization and modeling aspects, rather than joining as maybe doing the hard work, as you mentioned earlier, Patrick. So, but any comment from all of you?
I think first of all, we need to dispel the general misconception that logistics is a very, for lack of a better word, very dirty, very sunset industry. I think today's with today's technology, I think it's adding a lot of sexiness to the logistics industry. So for the young Gen Z folks, they want to come to the logistics industry, there's still a lot of room. There's a lot of things to play because we talk about data, we talk about AI, we talk about even marketing within a logistics company. There are a lot of jobs out there. What's more important to note is the entire supply chain industry, from freight all the way to last mile deliveries. It's in this large digital transformation phase, right? It's on steroids, right? Things need to be digitized fast. So I think for degree holders, for tech students coming in, I think technology it's a very nice space to join, to come in.
Okay. Thank you.
Maybe I can
yes.
add a bit too. There's no fixed discipline that suit us the most. We hire any type of discipline. Some of the basic skills are important. You must be tech savvy, very sensitive to figures, but we hire for character. So if you have the persistence to be successful, good in execution, great in communications, you have a huge advantage.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Unfortunately, we cannot raise all other remaining questions and also some of those that have been raised in the chat box. We will share them with the panel, and then we will summarize and share the insights for all the questions on the CILT website. Just as a last part, I would like to ask the panel if they want to share any specific insight as a takeaway for the audience for today's webinar.
I always share this at some of the other sharing sessions, because at the end of the day, we are here putting our hats from practitioner, from industry practitioner, but we must also put our hats to say that we are also the consumers. We are the ones ordering the food. We are the ones ordering the e-commerce package, right? So I think we need to take light that the delivery partners, the delivery people bringing products to your homes, give them a bit of credit, yeah? Once in a while, give them a praise, yeah?
Yeah, sure. Paul, maybe, or Sunti, whichever are ready.
Happy to chip in now. I think one of the questions earlier on asked about how much carbon we save. Answer is 600 ton a year, and that's about 10,000 trees for 10 years to sort of reduce the CO2 in the same equivalent amount. So I think on that, the entire industries, as what Patrick's put it, we are also consumers. We're also responsible for the long-term sustainability of our environment. And therefore, it is very important for us to work together to encourage more digitalization, more consolidation, more productivity, more manpower saving, and all these sort of things. And therefore, we are also responsible consumer to make sure that we consume the services that encourage long-term sustainability. So my takeaway message is how can we all play a part in making our environment more sustainable? Thank you.
Okay, great. Paul?
Yeah, I can't agree more. And we are all stakeholders in this, and it takes all of us to work together. And I think there is a question from a chatbot about EV. How do we promote it? Actually, half or more than half of our van size delivery in mainland China, they are already by EV. And we are planning to expand that to the other markets. We do have a EV selling and leasing vertical that we have in China. We're designing our own EV. So one day in Singapore, you might see our EV.
Okay, great. So I would like to thank again everyone who participated in this webinar, especially our 3 speakers, and hope to see everyone in our future webinars. Thank you very much.